Although my eyes are on the knife, and the hand that holds the knife, I become aware of something behind me. A shadow. A presence. But it is soft and blunt, and it cannot hurt me. So I dismiss it. Everything must reach forward. All my mind must be focused on the knife. On the boy. A few days later, I saw it happen. Those days had been good. I'd been hanging out with Shane and his gang. For the first time since going to that school, I felt like a part of something. I wasn't really a full member of their gang, and I hadn't turned freak. Not really. But I had changed. I looked a bit different, and I was thinking about things that I had never thought about before. About the world and what was wrong with it. Not just the tiny bit that I was in, but the whole world. When I walked, I didn't always keep my head down. I hadn't gotten the courage to talk to Maddie much, but she didn't seem to mind if I stood near her in the playground or sat next to her at lunch. It wasn't all good. Kirk didn't like me, and quite often he'd make sure the talk went in a direction I couldn't follow. But Kirk was only one kid, and I knew from experience that getting snubbed was a hell of a lot better than getting punched. Anyway, the next Wednesday afternoon, I was in the science lab on the 3rd floor. The sinks that overlooked the back of the school. Out that way, you first have a small square of playground, then a big rectangle of all-weather field, and then the fence at the school gates, and then a building that used to be the social club, but is now a nothing, a shell, like a rotten tooth. There's always graffiti on the walls of the club, body parts, names, swear words, all that. I once thought that I should do it too, make my mark on the wall. But I bought a can of white spray paint and sneaked out late, but I couldn't think of anything to write. I shook the can so that it made that rattling noise, but nothing else. I didn't have a nickname I could spray, and there wasn't a girl I fancied, not then. I didn't want to write the name of a crappy football team, and I didn't want to copy the other things scrawled there, the F word, the C words, and the ugly pictures. I was as empty as the social club. So I threw the can into the gypsy field and went home. But now, looking out over the back of the school, I saw some kid was doing what I hadn't been able to do. I couldn't make out what he was spraying, but there was no mistaking the combinations of swooping arm movements and quick little steps. Words. I watched him for as long as it took me to wash out my test tube, not thinking much about who he was or what he was writing. I didn't even point it out to the kids on either side of me. I'd forgotten about it by going home time, but then I saw the crowd. I remembered in junior school, we had some tadpoles. Someone found a jelly mass of spawn in the beck, which was a miracle because nothing was supposed to live in there except rats and thick green scummy weed. We fed them with a little piece of meat, tied to some string. It took the tadpoles a while to realize that it was dinner time, but then they'd all swim over to the meat. What happened then wasn't really what you'd expect. They wouldn't go mad like sharks having a feeding frenzy. No, they'd all gather around the meat, shoulder to shoulder, nudging closer, but hardly moving. Sometimes one would wriggle for a few seconds, and then go back to the patient nutting and crowding. You couldn't really see them eat because their mouths were so small. The kids gathered around the wall were like that, all pressing forward, some wriggling, but mainly just concentrated, passive attention. I was with a kid called Emery. He wasn't really a friend of mine, but sometimes we walked home together, because he lived in the same street. Emery was a bit gormless, but all right apart from that. He had to get another kid to do his tie after PE, and he wore slip-on shoes to get around the problem of laces. "Something going on," he said. "Looks like it. I think I saw someone spraying on the wall earlier." "A kid?" "Yeah, but not one of ours, I don't think." "Was it another thingy?" Emery laughed, a moist, slightly mental laugh. He was talking about last year when a really big dirty picture appeared on the wall. It was famous for a while. "Dunno." We joined the back of the crowd. "What does it say?" Emery could read, just, but the writing was too scraggly for him. It was about Roth. It was really bad. It said things about him, what he liked to do, about what he liked having done to him. I wanted to laugh. I wasn't the only one. The crowd of kids thrummed with a sort of suppressed glee. But no one was going to show it, not with Roth himself standing there in front of the wall. He was looking at the writing. I could see half of his face, and his jaw was clamping and loosening. Clamping and loosening. Other than that, it showed nothing. Miller and Bates were with him. They looked nervous, glancing from Roth to the wall, to the kids in the crowd. I had no idea how it was going to end. In a way, I didn't want it to. It was the best thing that had happened since I came to this crappy school. Then a little kid pushed toward the front of the crowd, elbowing his way through and raising a protesting cloud of tuts around him. It was the same squirt who'd come to get the ball from me that day. He read the writing on the wall, to himself. Then his lips moving silently. Then he began to smirk. Then smile. Then his whole face lit up into a huge grin. And finally the laughter poured out of him in a frothing, bubbling waterfall. Either he hadn't seen Roth, or he didn't know who he was. Roth didn't bother much with the younger kids, same as he didn't bother with the freaks. So it was possible the kid just didn't make a connection between the name on the wall and the brooding monster next to him. Big mistake. The next thing that happened was pretty obvious. That first laugh was enough to set the whole crowd off. Someone spluttered, then in a great rush we were all laughing and screaming like a load of baboons. It was a real moment of freedom and release. I don't know how well I've got across to you how our school wasn't a happy place. It was a place where you always felt like there was a belt around your chest, tightening, squeezing, and another weight on your head, keeping you bowed down, eyes on the ground. But in a second, those weights, the one around the chest and the one on the head, were gone, and our souls soared up into the clouds of laughter. I was laughing so hard that tears were streaming from my eyes. I know it's one of those things you say, I laughed till I cried, but I really did, wiping away the tears with the rolled back cuffs of my jumper. And for once, we were united together, and it felt good and strong, and Roth seemed smaller compared to us, no longer a creature of our nightmares, but just a bully, and like all bullies, helpless when his victims stood together. It couldn't last. Roth was slow to act, but when he moved, he was like a predatory beast. He spun and grabbed the kid and lifted him up, had one hand on his throat and the other on the scruff of his neck, so the kid choked at the front, yanked at the back. His laughter stopped, and his face took on a look of bemusement, followed by the agony of the grip. And then, as the reality of his situation dawned, the terror of what would follow, and our laughter stopped too, as if we'd been turned off with a switch. We were no longer together, but alone. Funny, eh? Yeah, funny. Ross spoke quietly, but everyone could hear him. The kid made a gurgling sound. It was the sound that comes with death in bad films. Trouble is, it's a bit of a mess. Doesn't look good. Ought to clean it up, really. Give us a hand, eh? Yeah. Then he did something grotesque. I mean, even by his standards. He made the kid's head nod, in the way you sometimes see children make their dolls and teddies nod when they talk to them. The kid's face was rigid and waxy with horror. Good boy. That's it. And then Roth lifted up the face of the kid and put it on the rough brick wall. Let's give it a clean, eh? Yeah. The kid made a wailing sound, maybe the most horrible thing I've ever heard. His legs, like the legs of a hangman, began to thrash in the air. I wanted to do something, but like the rest of the crowd, I was paralyzed by the evil before us. Not just the fear of it, but the spectacle itself. Evil as a circus. That won't work. Shane, doing his trick, appearing from nowhere. Ross, still holding the kid, slowly turned his black gaze on Shane. What? How much hatred can you get in an innocent word? No, not hatred. Someplace beyond hatred, because hatred could burn off or burn out or lose itself in the passage of time. This was something ancient, immortal. This was the moth that comes up from the deep to eat you. The mouth that has been eating you for 100 million years. The mouth that will never stop eating you. It'll still be there. Worse than that. And all you'll do is draw attention to it. People will point at it and say that's where you mashed the kid into the wall. The voice was cool, light, serious, but amused. Each word formed and perfect. I wished it was my voice. My voice slurred and stumbled and got muddled. Shane's words were like pebbles he'd found on the beach, beautiful and shiny, and all he had to do was hold them out in his hand. Then there was a movement, and Shane lurched forward, slapping against the wall. It was Bates. He'd flung himself onto Shane's back. Miller made his whooping laugh, but it lacked mirth, lacked conviction. Everything about it was crap. The cowardice, the timing. Yeah, very brave, said Shane, a little smile on his face. I noticed that there was something in his hand. Doesn't help you much, though, does it? He said to Ross. Ross stared back at him, the kid still hanging like a rabbit in his hands. But me, I can fix it. What? That was a different what. Puzzled now. Interested. Shall I? Said Shane, holding up what was in his hand. It was a spray paint can. Ross grunted. Then Shane stepped up to the wall, to the writing. The letters were crude and spaced. He sprayed. Ross grunted again. Someone in the crowd laughed. A new laugh. This one, not the release of hysteria we'd heard before. This was a laugh of satisfaction. Of us against them. And the them was the teachers. The laughter became general. Shane had done something simple. He had turned Ross into Rothman. Rothman taught history. Nobody cared much about Mr. Rothman. His voice was high and quavery, and he threatened a lot, but never delivered. If you had to put a word to what most people thought about Rothman, you'd probably hit on contempt. And now, his name was up there instead of Ross. It was Mr. Rothman, school teacher, who was said to do those things, to like having those things done to him. And Shane had done a good job. The scrawl exactly matched the original. It didn't matter that we all knew it was meant to be Roth. It now said Rothman, so Rothman is what it meant. Roth dropped the kid. He scuttled away on all fours, too frightened to stand up straight. All the time, Roth's eyes never left Shane. Now he nodded. Shane met his eyes. He nodded back. People drifted away reluctantly at first, worried in case they should miss something. But soon, there was just Shane and me and the kid, who squatted on his haunches against the wall. I don't know where the rest of the freak gang were. You okay? Shane took the kid by the hand, pulled him up gently. What's your name? Skinner. I don't mean your surname. What's your first name? Kevin. Well, Kevin, you're a lucky kid. The boy looked up at Shane. His eyes were glistening. His lips formed words, but I didn't hear. And I don't know if it was some kind of thanks or a mumbled curse, because sometimes you hate the people who help you. Either way, the kid was up and running and lost in the streets of the red brick houses.